Hello there, I'm Rob Hudson. I'm a partner with the law firm Frost Brown Todd. I'm a volunteer with the Northern Kentucky Bar Association as well, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the NKBA Legend Series. In this series, we interview distinguished Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati lawyers, and what we hope to do through the program is to help elevate the profession with a particular focus on what it takes to succeed as an attorney, both personally and professionally. Today's program will be recorded. It'll be made available to help guide the next generations of lawyers in our region. For live attendees, and we really appreciate your attendance and participation today, be sure to post your questions in the Q&A or chat features, and I'll ask them at the end of the program, time permitting. We're pleased and proud today to be joined by NKBA legend Greg Shumate. Greg has practiced law in Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati for more than 35 years. He built a substantial corporate law practice, and he served as Northern Kentucky member in charge of two prominent firms, first with Greenbaum, Dahl & McDonald, and now with Frost Brown Todd. He's been involved with the NKBA. He chaired the NKBA business section. He held board and/or officer leadership posts with the Northern Kentucky University Board of Regents, Carnegie Visual and Performing Arts Center, Kentucky Arts Council, Playhouse in the Park, and People Working Cooperatively. He even became a special justice on the Kentucky Supreme Court, became 40 under 40 Greater Cincinnati business leader. I can speak from personal experience in interacting with Greg. He's a strong leader. He's a consensus builder. He chaired Kenton County's Republican Party for 25 years. He's been recognized as one of the top 100 leaders in Greater Cincinnati and is one of the top 10 most influential leaders in Northern Kentucky. He's a co-founder of Suits That Rock. They've raised more than $1.5 million for the Carnegie in Covington. And I've saved the best for last in introducing Greg. He's the newest inductee of the Northern Kentucky Legends Music Hall of Fame as a founding member and leader of the Drysdales. So we have about an hour together today, and he's going to share with us how he practiced law and also did all of these other things. Greg, welcome to the Legends program.
Thanks, Rob. I'm kind of embarrassed, my gosh. I think you're talking about somebody else. Well, but I'll fill in.
Well, we, as the years pass and all the fun activities kind of build up, the resumes do too. And of course, I only shared with the group a small portion of some of the things that you've done, some of the noteworthy things. And what I really look forward to today is, helping the younger or newer lawyers to understand, with our education, knowledge, skills, and abilities as lawyers, really we can strive to accomplish just about anything. And I think your career exemplifies that. What we typically do with the programs, Greg, is we start with some background. I know you were born here in Northern Kentucky. You have a very close, large family. And what were some of the principles taught in the family that kind of came in handy down the road as a lawyer?
Well, Rob, we grew up in a relatively small house. I lived in a bedroom with three other brothers, two bunk beds. It's kind of cool, I guess. I'm looking around my office right now, and the bedroom was smaller than my office is here, and smaller than your office. I was just in there the other day. So when you're in tight quarters like that with a bunch of brothers, you got to learn a lot of things like teamwork. You got to learn how to get along with others in such tight quarters. And the truth is, you really got to learn a work ethic. We didn't have a ton of money growing up. I know I worked my way through college. I paid every nickel of my college and my law school. So it certainly instills a lot of those kinds of things, in you when you're young.
It sounds like your sister had her own room, right?
My sister did have her own room. She would not have had it any other way, Rob.
Yeah, well,
she deserved it.
you had referenced you worked your way kind of through undergrad and law school, to pay for it. But I'm sure you had at least one or two what I call character building jobs. The jobs that we have that help prepare us. Maybe we don't even know that at the time, doing that job's going to maybe help us be better at what we ultimately do as a lawyer. Did you have one of those growing up?
Yeah, I actually, had quite a few. One of them, I learned what OSHA was when I was between my freshman and sophomore year in college. I worked as a dishwasher at the old Jerry's restaurant in Fort Wright. And they received an OSHA violation that summer because the area I worked in as a dishwasher was over 105 degrees consistently. So that was not probably my finest moment, but I made it through the summer, made enough money to go back to school, and that worked. The other one that I think it'd be worthwhile mentioning is I kind of stepped up my game a little bit and became a bartender at a nightclub in Cincinnati by the name of January's. Those that were around back then could attest. It was a Las Vegas style, the biggest nightclub in town. All the famous performers came there. But I learned that I couldn't live that lifestyle. You wouldn't get home until the crack of dawn. You didn't finish working until 2 o'clock in the morning. And, I will tell you, it also taught me respect for other folks, right? You see these folks working so hard, waiting on tables, trying to feed their families, and then you watch customers treat them poorly. And I learned very early on that you need to treat everybody well. You need to treat everybody the same, whether or not they've got a coat and tie on, or whether they got a waitress outfit on, or whatever. And hopefully I've taken that lesson to heart over the years.
Well, and I know you became a corporate lawyer at Adams Brooking firm out of law school. Those early years, what were the keys to developing proficiency as a corporate lawyer those first few years of your practice?
Well, when I joined Adams Brooking out of law school, I had always envisioned myself, surprise, surprise, as a litigator, right? I figured, the gift of gab and all that good stuff, but they didn't need a litigator at the time. They needed a corporate lawyer. And at Adams Brooking and Stepner, it was a smaller law firm, large for Northern Kentucky, but smaller firm. And I got to do a lot of things, a wide variety of things. And I learned by doing, I learned by watching the other folks in my law firm. My first ever mentor as a lawyer was John Brooking, who was a very prominent, very well-known corporate lawyer in Northern Kentucky. In fact, John was one of the founding fathers of Northern Kentucky University, which I ended up having the honor of serving on their board of regents recently. That law firm was not short on people that were good mentors. Jerry Dusing and Jim Walberman also come to mind. Just great. It was a great environment for me to land my first job and to really learn how to practice law by getting my hands dirty.
Well, it sounds like you had some mentors that played a big role in your development. You mentioned a couple of them. If there are any others, please, if you can share that with us. And what did they do to help you along in mentoring?
Well, first of all, learning from them by watching them. And quite frankly, sometimes you can learn from a mentor what not to do, right? And that's not my style, or that's not the way I do things. Certainly making sure that you watch what they do, you pay attention, you listen, you ask questions. Those mentors, folks that are good mentors, they're always willing to help. And then I was really blessed when I changed law firms in the late 90s. I came over to Greenbaum Dalla McDonald, and I had been recruited pretty heavily by a guy named Bill Robinson, who I know a lot of folks know. Bill was the best mentor I've ever had. Bill Robinson truthfully taught me so much about how to treat people, about how to practice law. And if you want to talk about work ethic, you just needed to be around Bill Robinson for 10 minutes. He got things done. He was a huge leader in Northern Kentucky, and quite frankly, I miss him dearly. I'm sitting in his office right now, and I say that because it is still his office, and every day I come in here, I come to work every day, and it reminds me of Bill. So I could go on and on about Bill and all the things that he taught me. Rob, I know he taught you, but you know, I was blessed over the years to have good mentors. There's no doubt about it.
Well, in terms of how Bill treated other people, was he a good role model in that respect?
I had been, so when I was contemplating leaving Adams Brooking at the time, I had been recruited by several other law firms. At the time, I had just become Republican Party chairman, and hopefully folks thought I was a good corporate lawyer as well. So, you know, I had achieved a level of notoriety because of being in the paper all the time and all that good stuff that, you know, there were quite a few firms interested in talking to me. And when I talked to Bill Robinson, I came over to meet with him. And of course, Bill's got this unbelievably impressive office in the River Center, right below the Metropolitan Club, a view of downtown Cincinnati. I don't think I've ever been in an office, except the Oval Office, that has been more impressive than Bill Robinson's office was in those days. And Bill and I had arranged to meet first and then go to lunch. And so we go down into the parking lot, and there was a parking lot attendant down there, a fellow by the name of Jimmy Williams, who folks around Covington would remember. Jimmy was, you know, mentally challenged, worked hard every single day. In fact, he was the Kenton County surveyor for a little while. Everybody liked Jimmy, and he was sweeping the parking lot. And he walked up to Bill, and they acted like they were best friends, and probably were. And I'll never forget, after lunch, I called my wife and I said, I'm going to Greenbaum. And if for no other reason than to see Bill Robinson in action, I'm impressed. I'm almost intimidated by the guy going into his office, all the accomplishments. At that time, he hadn't become American Bar Association president yet, but you know, he had all of the credentials, all of the everything. And then I go down into the parking lot, and he treats Jimmy Williams not even like an equal, like a superior, and that just meant a lot to me. That spoke a lot to me, and I have tried to live up to that example ever since. And you know, I'm kind of tearing up just thinking about it again.
Yeah, Bill has been a frequent subject of our. I wish we had commenced this Legends program before Bill passed away, and he's been a frequent subject from a wide range of the legends in our program, and it's remarkable how many lives he touched. But, well, you became a trusted corporate counselor, both at the Adams firm and then at Greenbaum and beyond. One of the purposes of our program is to try to pass on some of this information to the younger and newer lawyers. What are some of the tips or practices that you'd offer a younger or newer lawyer in trying to reach this goal of being the trusted corporate counselor?
Well, first of all, it's assumed by your clients that you are a good lawyer. They wouldn't have come to you to begin with, but you have to be a good lawyer. And I think any lawyer's early stage of their career ought to be primarily focused on becoming a good lawyer, in whatever field you're in, whether it's corporate, whether it's litigation, whether it's human resources, whatever it may be. So you got to be a good lawyer, but then you've got to be a good, trusted confidant. And you've really made it when your clients trust you. And people like to do business with people they like, and that's a good thing. And I've always tried with my clients to treat them like family, to care about them, to ask about how their kids are doing, or ask about how their wife is doing or their husband, whatever it may be. You know, I invite clients to firm events that we either sponsor or host or put on. But more important than anything, they have to trust you, and you've got to give them a reason to trust you. And I think, hopefully over the years, especially, by giving them good counsel, hopefully that relationship continues to build and evolve. I remember telling a young lawyer one time the best phone call I ever got was on a Friday evening. I was out to dinner with my wife, Katie, and I got a call Friday evening from a client whose son had gotten a DUI in Lexington. And I thought, you know what? I've arrived. My client called me on a personal matter, and I meant enough to him, to this client this guy was the CEO of a fairly large corporation. Rob, we still do work for him. And he trusted me enough to call me on a Saturday evening. He knew he could call me on a Saturday evening, and he trusted my counsel. So that was a big moment for me. And I think that's where we all want to be with our clients, the trusted advisor relationship.
Well, one of the things I've noticed over the years is, and it could be a generational thing, that, maybe 40 years ago, trusted corporate counselors would more or less tell a client what to do. You need to do A, B, and C. And they would, I would call it push pretty hard. Is your style one of explanation and, teeing up the issue for the client, or is it to push hard where you think they ought to go?
Well, earlier we talked about mentors, and we talked about learning what works for you and what doesn't, what to do and what not to do from mentors. I learned a ton from John Brooking, but one thing I learned early on was John was very forceful with his clients. He made their decisions for them. He was very forceful. That was a way to practice law in those days. That is the way the general the general attorneys in the Bar Association, they viewed their role as the decision maker for their clients. I took a completely different approach. I like to educate my clients. I do preface a lot of times I get on a phone with a client. In fact, I've learned this from my political career as it was. I tell people all the time, do you want to hear what I really think, or do you want to hear what you want to hear? My guess is you don't pay me to hear what you want to hear. So, when you're delivering bad news, you always, in my opinion, the client is the final say. The client is who makes the decisions. All you're there for is to educate them. Now, they will ask you, what would you do, right? And that's fine. That's part of the trusted counselor role. But I do think that, practice of law has evolved to such that, I think my approach has worked well for me over the years. You certainly don't want to be making decisions for your clients, especially if you make a bad one. Boy, that doesn't work. But yeah, Rob, thanks for asking that, because I do think since I've been practicing law, things have changed quite a bit on that front.
Well, one of the things that I've enjoyed in working with you through the years, and I think you're a lot better at it than I am, is you spend a lot of time explaining things in non-legal terms. And if you and I are in a conference with a client together and I hear your explanation, I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, that's very thorough. I know exactly what he's talking about. Can we move on? But I think, Greg, the clients love the fact that you communicate in, again, basic language. I think you and I are kind of basic language guys. That's how we would try to communicate normally, but I've seen it just work wonders. They love it. They love it. After a conversation, I don't know, I'm assuming that part of your goal is, after the conversation, they truly understand what could be a complex corporate issue. And I don't know if there's a secret to how you do that. I've witnessed it, but I mean, any pointers that you can offer younger and newer lawyers on that part of it?
Yeah, I have yet to have a client thank me for a 10-page letter to them for and citing every single authority that is out there. And, the Sixth Circuit said this and the Eighth Circuit said this. I mean, these are business people that I represent. These are folks that, are out selling product that want to get to it. They want, your job is to distill it down for them. And, Rob, that's something over the years that, my quote, again, political career helped me with quite a bit, because I watched politicians who took very complex issues like the budget process, like taxation, and distill it down. And I learned very early on. In fact, I learned this from Mitch McConnell. If you've got more than 3 points, you've lost them. You got to have 3 basic points in whatever it is you're doing, and stick with it. And so I think part of our job as counselors and as lawyers is to take those legal briefs that sometimes can get to be 20, 30 pages long, and distill that down into 3 basic points or something, so that my client, who really, no offense, but they don't really care, they just want to get to the end. They want the result. And so distilling it down so they can make a good decision, but they do need to understand it. Otherwise, they can't make a good decision. So,
Right.
so it has become over the years something that I've really tried to work hard at. And then you always let them ask questions, right? And some clients, they don't even want to ask questions. They just say, well, what would you do? And, get to it. Other clients really dig in. And either way, you got to be able to work with them, but it's their style. It's their problem. It's their matter. It's their acquisition. In my world, it's they're buying a company. It's their acquisition. I just got to tell them why the reps and warranties are so important, and that's my job.
Well, over the years, you had developed more and more business, but in the beginning, I don't know, it's always struck me as kind of daunting. You were born here, so you knew some folks, and you had a great start with the Adams firm. But how did you go about developing business at the beginning? What were your first steps?
Well, again, back to the mentorship, Rob. John Brooking called me into his office one of the first weeks I was at the firm. And he said to me, you need to join 2 things, and I want you to come back in a couple of weeks and tell me what they are. And I want you to join 2 things. Tell me what they are. So the firm happened to be friends with a guy named Ken Harper, who, in my opinion, is one of the best political persons. And he was a gentleman politician. He was very effective as a state representative. He had been Secretary of State, but he needed somebody to run his campaign. And this was in 1988, I believe. And so I ran his campaign, and I joined the JCs. And I had a great time with the JCs. We won our campaign for Ken Harper. And in those days, there weren't very many Republican office holders in Northern Kentucky. So winning any campaign was a big deal. And when you got a young whippersnapper like me who runs the campaign, all of a sudden people say, wow, will you run mine? Or will you do, so early on, I started joining things, and I started doing things. One of my biggest pieces of advice to young lawyers is, somebody said this to me a while ago, and it took a while to sink in, but just show up, be there, and if you're there, people will like you. And, so being in person, being in events, doing things is important. And I did a lot of that early on. I ended up joining lots and lots of different charitable boards, political things over the years. But, my approach to marketing was more of a shotgun approach, Rob. You and I have talked about this over the years. I kind of wish my approach were more of a sniper. In other words, targeting specific clients, going out and making a pitch. That's just never what I've done. I can't remember the last pitch I did, other than the public entities you and I have done work with. I don't do pitches. I'm out in the community. I got a lot of lines in the water, and then, people, sometimes they'll call if they get a problem or what have you. So that's how I marketed, really, was just getting involved in things, getting involved in the community, meeting people, and becoming a better lawyer.
Well, I like the shotgun approach because if you get to choose, you get to choose what what your activities will be. And if you're passionate about them, and then people see you and work with you, then they know you a little bit. The shotgun, the sniper approach of, okay, I want to get this client. Well, what if they don't know you all that well? You don't have a great foundation if there's no real relationship. And with the shotgun approach, where you're out and about and you're working on committees with people, then they're hiring you because they like you and they know you. That's a great way to start out a relationship. I'm just, I mean, and I think you are too, I've just been committed to that. I think it's the best model to have long-lasting relationships. So yeah, I occasionally people ask you to do a pitch and you'll do it, but I love the method of find something you're passionate about and then go out and do it and see if anything comes of it. But I think the problem with the shotgun approach is that it takes time, and a lot of time. And for you, Greg, and I don't think you and I have ever really talked about this, what was the time frame that was involved for you to see actual results of originating new clients, that had some real substance? I mean, I'm not just talking about a kind of a one-off here, but when did you start getting real traction in developing business in terms of years after you started all of this?
Wow, Rob, that's a tough question. Sometimes you get results fairly quickly. Sometimes you'll be on a board with somebody and, they need a lawyer to help their son's new business, or but I'll be honest with you, there are still marketing efforts that I did 20 years ago that are still just, bringing in business. A perfect example is, I back when I was at Adams, Brookings and Stepner, my practice kind of evolved into representing family businesses in Northern Kentucky. And to adequately represent a business, a family business, you also have to know about estate planning, because you got to be able to help that company with their succession planning. So I became an estate planning lawyer as well and started giving seminars. When I joined Greenbaum had one of the best, if not the best, estate planner in Greater Cincinnati, Bill Montag. And I said to myself, well, it's a waste of time for me to be a estate planner when I got a guy like that I could just refer people to. So I quit doing those seminars, and we're talking about the late 90s. I still get estate planning referrals to this day. People that remember my seminar from the 90s. But on the flip side, I've also met folks, in board settings, and, they need something in a couple of weeks. So part of it's all about timing. Part of it's all about when the client has a need, because let's face it, most of it is driven, or it's all driven by really when the client has a need for something. But you got to have it. You got to be out there. You got to be, you got to put in the time. And if you're doing something that you're passionate about, that you like, then putting in the time isn't really all that bad, because you enjoy it. Rob, for me over the years, I got my kids and my wife involved in politics. I'll never forget, we'd walk in 4th of July parades, and I still got this wagon in my garage that I used to pull my kids around in the wagon. And I'd put the bumper stickers of whatever candidate was running that year on the wagon. My kids would throw candy out to the other kids, and we made it a family affair. Now, did that take a lot of time? Yes. Was that on my 4th of July? Yes. But, if you do something that you love and you're passionate about and you involve your family, that's how I got quality time back then. Even though I was running, it seemed like 24/7, you find things like that. So, everybody has to find out what they love and what they're good at. You and I have talked about this, Rob. I've always had this quaint little theory that I call the basket theory. I think we're all given certain gifts when we're born. Some people's basket is maybe fuller than others. And the things that are in your basket are always different. The successful people are the people that take what they've been given in their basket and use it to their benefit, to their community's benefit, to their family's benefit. And for me, it just kind of happened. I was lucky that I found out, I think, what I was good at, which, one of them, I think, was politics. So,
well, what's some practical bottom line advice for younger or newer lawyers trying to develop business out there?
well, again, show up. Make sure that you do things, you go to things. If your law firm has a cookout, I think you ought to go to that. If you never know where you're going to meet someone. The other thing is to, again, focus on what your strengths are, focus on what you're good at, and go out and meet folks. And if we're, limiting to the discussion to new business, again, everybody's path is different on new business. I tell young lawyers at our firm all the time, sometimes it's just you're the greatest lawyer in a big law firm with regard to certain, EEOC claims, and you become the greatest lawyer on the planet, and maybe your marketing skills aren't what you'd like them to be, but you become really, really good at what you do. I view those folks as being extremely successful, just like the rainmaker senior partner person who happens to be really good at meeting and greeting and joining the Queen City Club and rubbing elbows with Fortune 500s and all that. That's never been my shtick, by the way. I'm not a Fortune 500 elbow rubber kind of guy. I've never joined the Queen City Club or things like that, although I was a member of the Metropolitan Club for a long time. But just find out what you're good at and then do it.
Well, turning to the subject of service and leadership, I'd love to hear more about Suits That Rock. How did it get started? What is it? How did you become involved?
Well, going back to my law school days, Rob, I had on a lark played in a high school rock and roll band. And when I went to law school, you may recall, Rob and I, for those of you out there, Rob and I, full disclosure, were roommates in law school at the University of Kentucky. But we had an event called the Libel Show, which a lot of law schools do. And I put together a band down there. In fact, we formed a band called the Cherry Sisters. And if you want to look up why we called them the Cherry Sisters, look up the Cherry Sister case. It's from the late or early 1900s. And we studied it in torts too. If you remember, it was a defamation, the case surrounded the truth is a defense thing. But I formed a band, and we got Biff Campbell, who any of you folks that went to UK, Biff. I found out Biff was a guitar player, and so we put together a band for the Libel Show. So fast forward, I get home, and I got these guys that I played with a little bit in Lexington. We form a punk rock band here. And then I got to meet guys like John Damashko, who's been the chair of every board in town. He's been chair of St. Elizabeth's board. He's been the chair of the airport board. John is a very prominent local guy who also played music when he was young. And then Kevin Canifax, who is the head of the local operations of Fidelity, who had an interest in becoming a vocalist. So we put together something called Suits That Rock. We have raised a lot of money over the years. I'm proud to say it's one of my proudest things I've done. We've raised over $1.5 million for children's arts education programming in Covington. And we've raised it at a time when the Covington public school system has cut a lot of music education out of the budget. So it's been a fun thing over the years, but at the same time, very, very, very rewarding. And boy, you talk about a place where I can meet some CEOs. I mean, the head of Alta Fiber, the head of Scripps Howard, the president of the University of Cincinnati, all of those folks have participated and been musicians in Suits That Rock in the past. So that's been a great opportunity for me to rub those Fortune 500 elbows and not at the Queen City Club.
Yeah, yeah, and probably a lot more fun on balance.
Oh yeah. Like I
Yeah.
said, find out what fits you. I'm not sure the Queen City Club environment, I'm not bragging on it at all, because that's a great environment for some folks. And I've always just kind of, in fact, looked back thinking, maybe I wish I were more of that guy that liked to go there for breakfast and lunch. And, but that's just never, that never worked for me. So I never really pursued it.
Well, and the area of politics, we've spent a little bit of time talking about your time in politics, how you get started with Ken Harper. And I'm concerned that, some people view involvement in politics as, a negative thing. And I wanted to be sure to ask you about kind of your perspective on, is this a form of service? Is it worthy service? What kind of results can it yield for a community when a lawyer, with knowledge, skills, and abilities, a consensus builder, gets involved in the political realm?
Rob, thanks a lot for that question. Because the truth is, I'm very proud of my service in politics. You're absolutely right. Politics has become a four-letter word, and in a lot of regards, rightfully so. What I would suggest is that politics for the right reasons is excellent. It's great. It's where I think over the years, and when I served years ago on the JCs, we did a lot of good work, a lot of good charity work. I remember doing the Santa Claus thing in December and all the toy giveaway and all the things, and it's great work. And the Chamber of Commerce does great work. But for me, if you have good people in politics, there's nothing more important in my opinion. And unfortunately, I'm not saying that there's not well-intentioned folks in politics today, but with the 24/7 rancor on, all the different media outlets that we have, and the cursing at each other, and the lack of civility, I think that has really tarnished what I think should be an avenue for distinguished service. When I first got involved in politics back in the 80s, Northern Kentucky was an entirely different place. The Republicans were out registered by 2.5 to 1. Think about that for a minute. There was only one. When I graduated from law school, there was only one elected official in all of Northern Kentucky who was a Republican. Everybody else was a Democrat. And so when I first got involved with Ken Harper, and Ken Harper was an absolute prince of a guy. He was the only elected official we had, prince of a guy. And I learned a lot from Ken about the right way to do things, about serving your community and not serving any special interest group or serving yourself for yourself. And so politics can be great. We did a lot of things for our region. The influence that we had and that we gained by becoming a Republican area, I think we use that for the good. We have really good quality elected officials in Northern Kentucky right now. I look at our 3 county judge executives, Steve Pendry, Gary Moore in Boone, and Chris Knuckleman here in Kenton. And I look at those guys and I say, I would want them running my business. They are good decision makers. They're good for the region. They don't listen to any individual clique or group. Poor Steve Pendry, he takes more arrows out there, because he's always doing the right thing. So those are the folks that need to be in politics. Unfortunately, Rob, as you know, those folks are getting out of politics. Those folks are tired of the rancor. I'm one of them. I decided not to run for chairman last year. That was my quote retirement, so to speak, from politics. And a big reason was I got tired of fighting with the folks that, are registered Republicans, but didn't see that it was a good thing to agree to disagree with folks, on the other side of the aisle. I can't tell you how many times, Rob, over the last 10 years, I was called weak because I was willing to listen to and agree to disagree with folks that were more on the Democratic side of the aisle and to work with them. I don't think there's that tolerance in politics anymore, and that's a problem, but that's for a whole different discussion.
One, maybe the next generation of lawyers, the fact of the matter is our legislators are, probably predominantly lawyers. And, there are different ways of looking at this. As I was coming up in the professional ranks in Northern Kentucky, every time I saw a legislator, I offered, and this was regardless of political party, I tried to offer my sincerest thank you for their service because, if you're in it for the right reasons and you're not looking out only for yourself, then, let's face it, it's not tremendously financially remunerative. It can be somewhat remunerative, but if you were to plow all your time into the practice of law and practice at a high level, that's a better financial decision, I think, than serving in the legislature or serving on as a county rep or on boards there. And I hope the next generation of lawyers understands that this is a high calling. Yes, on the one hand, people call it politics, but on the other hand, if you're in the right position to get things done, you can make a big difference for your community. Are you comfortable, Greg, talking about a couple of instances when, your position as chair, with some credibility, within the party, benefited the community?
Yeah, sure, Rob. Especially because I'm not chairman anymore, so I can tell. I could tell stories for days about it. But I want to real quick double back on two things that you said that are actually more brilliant than you probably thought they were. One is if you're in politics for money, for the remuneration, you're in it for the wrong reasons. By definition, there is no money in politics. State representatives make $26,000 a year, $26,000 to go to Frankfurt, spend all that time away from your family, etc. I could go down the line. The other thing I will say is, about politics is, and this is for the lawyers out there. I think lawyers are the perfect people to be in politics, and here's why. First of all, you got to know the law, right? Okay, so that's a no-brainer to say. But I think even more importantly, to me, being a lawyer really helped my political career for this reason. Being a lawyer taught me to agree to disagree. Okay, when I first became a lawyer, I was a brand new lawyer. I had chaired Ken Harper's campaign. I was kind of starting to be known as a Republican guy. And we hired a young female lawyer, who was very liberal. And she said she was. She and I purposefully went to lunch at least once a week. And we purposefully talked about whatever lightning rod topic was out there that day. We spent a lot of time talking about abortion, for example. And while I don't think either of us convinced the other of our position on any matter, probably, I do think that we both learned respect for each other. That, hey, you know what? I may be pro-life and you may be pro-choice, but I respect how you got to that decision. You didn't convince me to change my position, but I respect you and I respect your position, and I think you're a good person. I don't think you're evil incarnate, which is unfortunately what it's become today. The reason why being a lawyer is so important, Rob, is that we learn, I think, hopefully, to agree to disagree as lawyers. You know, I will have a very difficult negotiation with opposing counsel for a business deal. And after the deal's over, hopefully, when I see them at the Northern Kentucky Bar Association Christmas dinner dance, that lawyer and I can have a beer together and maybe even talk about it and laugh about it, right? We still respect each other. And that is why being a lawyer is so important for politics. If the rest of the world could learn what we lawyers know, which is we need to respect each other regardless of our position, and respect the person, respect where they're coming from, I think that would eliminate a whole lot of problems we got in our world today. So, you know, I think, you know, regardless of, you know, I know back in the day, and I swore I wasn't going to throw names out there too much, but, you know, back in the day, when the Democrats were in power in Northern Kentucky, one of the most powerful guys locally was an attorney at the time, Dieters, Benzinger, and Lavelle, Mark Guilfoyle. Well, Mark and I could not have been more opposite on more campaigns. Well, he and I served on the Northern Kentucky University Foundation committee to try to bring an arena to Northern Kentucky, which we did, by the way. And it was a bipartisan effort. He and I became really good friends during that period of time and to this day. And part of it was that while he and I traded barbs in the newspaper, and boy, we did. I mean, he'd say something really nasty about me in the Cincinnati Enquirer, and I'd say something nasty right back about him in the Enquirer, in print, for all of our family to see. We still respected each other. And afterwards, we were able to accomplish some great things in a bipartisan way. If you've ever been to Northern Kentucky University's arena, I think you'll agree with me that that's a daggone good thing for Northern Kentucky as a region to have. That happens because of bipartisan cooperation. We tried to get an arena for years and couldn't do it because we were fighting with each other all the time. When we all got together and agreed, that's when we ended up getting that sparkling new, beautiful arena. And that's just one example.
Well, and you know, the idea of political power being I mean, it all depends on what purpose it's used for, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And, you know, I mean, to me, an example is some of the work that you and others did to help tank out in Northern Kentucky. If you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, you know, so years ago, a lawsuit was brought with regard to the Transit Authority of Northern Kentucky, the bus service, and the tax increases that had come over the years in order to continue to provide for the bus service was challenged in litigation here in Northern Kentucky. The plaintiff won, and the plaintiff won at the Court of Appeals level. We were this close to losing our bus service in Northern Kentucky. And Steve Pendry from Campbell County hired me and our law firm, Greenbaum, Dahl McDonald, Rob, to represent the Campbell County Fiscal Court, not in the lawsuit. The lawsuit had already been lost. We were hired to fix it. Well, what we did was, and again, it's a wonderful thing being in a big law firm with a lot of great lawyers. I had the best local, state and local tax guy literally in the country in my law firm, a guy named Mark Summer in Louisville. Mark and I created a legislative fix, which made the tax increases retroactively approved by the Kentucky state legislature, by the legislature. Now, the legislators were concerned about it. They were concerned about the retroactive nature of that, and it was in the middle of a very heated legislative session. I don't even remember what was going on, but I remember, and in those days, it was fairly split 50-50. In fact, I think the Republicans had the Senate and the Democrats still held the House in Kentucky. And I was asked to go down to Frankfurt at the end of the session to talk to some of our legislators about approving the tank fix. Now, I can tell you, if you've ever been to Frankfurt during a legislative session, you'll know that there are thousands of people that want to talk to those legislators. They are lined up in the hallways, outside, down the street. They literally hand you a take a number type thing when you walk into the legislator's office. They're not seeing anybody, in other words. So I got there, and Damon Thayer and Katie Stein, both senators, saw me standing out in the hall and ushered me in. The reason they did that was because they trust me, and I don't really ask them for a whole lot, but I asked them for this one. I said, I want you two to vote for and get this bill out of committee. And Katie Stein chaired the committee, by the way. And she said, Greg, I trust you. I have concerns about whether or not it's constitutional, but I trust you. I'll get it out of committee. It ended up passing. It was challenged. Mark Summer was right. It was constitutional. And quite frankly, if you've ever ridden a tank bus, you've ridden a tank bus because, or at least in the last 20 years, you've ridden a tank bus because we were successful there.
That's terrific. Having known you through the years, you've raised two sons, you've been married for 35 years, college sweetheart, and you've done some other things. How have you managed the work-life balance? How does it work for you?
Well, first of all, and again, back to mentors. And I guess this is kind of becoming a recurring theme. I'll never forget John Brooking, as hard charging as he was. I'll never forget him telling me one time that he had gone to see one of our former Adams Brooking lawyers, a guy named Charlie Adams, on his deathbed. And he said the piece of advice Charlie gave him was, nobody ever sits on their deathbed and wishes they worked more. Everybody on their deathbed says they wish they spent more time with their family. The key for me has been to figure out how I can integrate doing all the things that, I felt like I needed to do to help my career and all those other things with being there for the family. I always placed family first. It was always one of those things, but we mentioned it before, the 4th of July parades with my little boys in the wagon, things like that. That's a good way to get things involved. For those folks out there who have seen us around town, you'll know Katie, and my wife Katie's a saint. She goes with me to just about everything. We go to things together. I learned that from Ken and Eileen Harper. Ken and Eileen Harper were always fixtures at things. Clyde and Mary Middleton, another couple that were at things together. When Jim Bunning was in town, Senator / U.S. Representative Jim Bunning, Hall of Fame pitcher, Jim Bunning and Mary were always together. And I learned that early on. The only way you're going to be able to do those things. Clyde Middleton told me this one time. He says, you'll never be able to do all the things you want to do unless you integrate your family into it. So that was the way I did it. But it is so important. And the older I get, the more important I realize that was.
Well, in the last couple of years at the NKBA, we've strived to place special emphasis on wellness issues. And I mean, to me, you've sort of implicitly covered a few of those things with your explanations for sort of how you tried to structure your activities and family involvement. Are there any other keys for you from a wellness perspective?
Well, when you're on a plane, if you ever listen to the instructions before you take off, they say, put the mask on your face before you help somebody else out. You got to take care of yourself. And I think staying in shape, staying mentally good is important. But again, I would argue that if you're doing things that you're passionate about, then, what's the old adage? You'll never work in a day, right? So, but it is important. You've got to take care of yourself because you can't take care of others if you can't take care of yourself. I think financial wellness is also important. That's the other thing I've learned over the years. Rob, heck, I'll drive a car until it falls apart. Make sure that you don't, spend more than you have. I've known lawyers with wellness issue problems because they live too high on the hog. I mean, how many folks do we know who have maxed out all their credit cards and now they're paying 18% interest and such? And these are lawyers that make a lot of money. So, just make sure that, you keep things grounded, you keep things basic. That's kind of what I've tried to do over the years. And I think, again, integrating what you're doing and being passionate about it will help your mental state as far as, the late nights and the, all the things you have to do to be a lawyer.
I mean, it seems like it's easier said than done, but that reservoir that you have built up, I'm not in financially bad straits, so I don't have to worry about that. I have my family, I love them, they love me. All of that builds up strength. And, we're, in this world, there will be trouble. We know we're going to have it. But I think getting prepared and getting stronger with the help of others and managing in a prudent way, your life and resources, sounds like that's been maybe part of the effective way that you've managed to do these things through the years and not run into some of the bigger issues that we see so many other lawyers face. So I really appreciate that advice. And again, these wellness issues are critical to the NKBA, and I just wanted to say thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, Rob, if I will tell you, my wife Katie is my rock, and I think we nurture our relationship. I'm not here to give relationship advice, but I can't tell you how important it is to have the close people around you as your rock. I mean, you have bad days. You come home, you have a bad day. I come home, I have a bad day. It'd be really bad if I came home and my wife hated the fact that I was coming home, So yes, and I think of all the things over the years, that rock, that foundation for me and your family. That's why it's so important to spend time with your family and to have that balance. Because if you don't have it, you don't have that foundation.
Well, we're coming to the close. I'm going to check the chat feature and Q&A in a moment to see if we have any questions from the attendees today. But any final words of wisdom, wit, or advice, or anything that you think we haven't covered that you wanted to cover in terms of passing on advice to new and younger lawyers?
Rob, I always feel like I'm learning more than I'm teaching. I think for sure. I learn more, every day. But look, show up, find out what you're good at, and do it. Okay, and be passionate about it. I think that those of all the things that we've talked about, all the things that I would say over the years, I would think that'd be those things would be the most important to your development.
Thanks, Greg. Hey, on behalf of the NKBA, we appreciate it. And for those attendees and people who view the program in the future, I just wanted to pass on, personal thank you, because I knew almost no one when I came to Northern Kentucky, but I knew Greg and Katie Shumate, and I'm one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that they set aside time to help me and to help me find my way here. And that's how you build trust and credibility, and that's a good place to begin as any to build a law practice, is how you care for others and treat others. And Greg and Katie Shumate, there's just no better. So special thanks
again, Rob.
Yeah. Special thanks to our live attendees today. We do appreciate your support. You know that our executive director, the wondrous Julie Jones, is going to be sending you CLE information for ethics credits. We do want your suggestions. We're in our third year of the program. We're looking forward to year 4. If there are those folks out there you think can help keep the program vibrant, either on a volunteer basis or as a legend, never hesitate to contact me or contact Julie at the Bar Association. I want everybody to have a terrific afternoon. And Greg, thank you very much again, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Rob. This was absolutely an honor and a pleasure.
Good day, everyone.